Needs no introduction because John Rosenberg introduced him before, but I'll tell you again that he is the Associate Dean of Education of the Faculty of Science at the University of New South Wales. Chris Tisdell, he's going to talk to us about digital education. Over to you, Chris.
Okay, thank you everybody. The future of education is right here. There's a cup holder under the lectern. I've never seen one of those before, but it's amazing, isn't it? Oh. All right. So everyone's had a cup of tea and a cup of coffee. So I hope you're feeling a little refreshed. It's been wonderful to chat with people. I haven't chatted to everyone here yet, but I'll be around today and tomorrow. So if you want to chat, I'm very happy to chat with you. Not everyone knows me, despite what John Rosenberg said before. Very well done, John. Thank you. First of all, I'm just going to open up with a little bit about myself. So what drives me, what keeps me awake, not only last night, but tonight and tomorrow night and the next night. Okay, so these are five things. Now, some of these things are educational virtues and some of them are not. Some of them are way beyond education. Some of them are just personal things that resonate with me. So the first one is scale. How do you take an idea, take a concept, and really make it massive? How do you touch everybody in the room? This is not a particularly large lecture, but imagine if you had 400 or 500 students, 1,000 students. How do you touch everybody, either face-to-face or online? Flexibility. How can you give students choice? How can they take control of their own learning? That's another big thing that resonates with me. How can they make it meaningful to them? Personalization. How can you give them timely and scaled feedback that's meaningful? The fifth one is an interesting one, openness. I was talking with a few people about this and the virtue to really create a level playing field where everybody has access to learning. I think that's very important. And lastly, diversity and inclusion, which is absolutely paramount. So these are the sort of things that drive me. Okay, now this talk is supposed to be fun. And also I'm hoping it's going to be more of a conversation than me sort of getting up here and prancing around. Okay, so I want to ask everyone a question. What were you doing 10 years ago? Think back, this is a serious question, right? Think back 10 years ago. It's 2007. What was your life like then? I'm not kidding. What was it like? You're obviously not doing the same thing now as you were then, right? Am I right? Of course, we're being excellent and, pushing the envelope and breaking down the barriers, but we're probably not doing the same kind of things. Okay, so a quick tour through 2007. We've moved on from Web 1.0 to Web 2.0. We'd been in that space for a few years. So we're moving from sort of read-only to read, write, collaborate. We're moving from static to more dynamic things. And there's a few other claims which I think are a little dubious. Impersonal to suddenly it knows you and your needs. Are we there yet? Are we really there yet? Not yet. Okay. I like this one down the bottom, moving from lecture to conversation. That's right. Okay. So Web 2.0 is here. Were you on MySpace? Come on, admit it. Raise your hand. No, okay. Yeah, okay. I see a few up the back. Right. In 2007, MySpace was still the world's largest networking website, social media-wise. Maybe you were friends with Dan on the opening page. Who knows? North Korea agreed to disarm back in 2007. Okay. Kim Jong-il, yes. The first iPhone came out. It's almost 10 years to the day. Steve Jobs holding up the iPhone. The people at BlackBerry were laughing and saying it's too expensive, it doesn't have a keyboard. We're not worried. Who has an iPhone here? Can I show of hands? Almost everyone. Okay. I'm sure some of you will have read the Horizon Report. It's a yearly report on what's happening, what's hot right now in education, and what's on the horizon for the next year, 2 to 3 years, 5 years. So back in 2007, these were some of the key aspects of technology in education. So user-created content, social networking, mobile phones. They sort of got to the massively gaming experience, but no MOOCs yet. Now think about the phones. I'll come back to that in a second. Let's fast forward 5 years in a time machine. It's now 2012. What does the Horizon Report say then? Mobile apps. So they've forgotten about the phone. They realised the hardware is actually not important or less important. They've moved on to the software now. So, you know, people don't buy the phones for a piece of hardware, they buy them for the apps. Okay, game-based learning, well, the game stuff's still there. Learning analytics. Maybe data, we should call it data analytics or something else. The Internet of Things. Tablet computing. Okay. Anybody know what gesture-based computing is? Anyone have a, yes, John?
Yeah, doing computing by moving at hands.
That's right. Yes, it's like you're doing a dance and the computer's doing stuff. Yes. How far are we with that? Are we there yet? All right, fast forward 5 more years. We're now in the present. Adaptive learning technologies. Oh, the second one's good. Mobile learning. So we've forgotten about the phones, we've forgotten about the apps, and actually now it's about the learning. Great, it only took us 10 years. Fabulous. The Internet of Things, kind of reminds me of 5 years ago. AI, we've talked about that this morning. There's been a few people who've already talked about it. AI, we've had some discussions around that. So this is where we think educational technology is heading in the next year, 2 years, perhaps the next 5 years. So why am I taking you back a blast from the past? Well, I guess one of the key things here is we need to look where we've come from to have some idea of how to navigate the future. What's worked? What hasn't worked? Okay. Now, 2007, this is something personal from me. 2007 was a big year for me. Okay, I've been in academia for about 15 years. And in 2007, I really decided to make a push for digital education. This was something that I'd not really been involved in before. I wasn't an expert. I was more of your traditional, just turn up to the lecture and you know, rabbit on. Okay. But I think making this change supported all of these core things that I've always believed in. And technology was not the end point. It was something that would support these outcomes. Okay. Now, also in the 27 Horizon Report is this idea of digital equity. So we know education is becoming much more digital, but with that, and perhaps with openness, we're tearing down barriers. But actually, are we creating more barriers by also using technology? So I'm going to talk a little bit about equity, diversity, and inclusion from a digital perspective. Okay, so one of my popular mantras or mottos is that everyone deserves access to learning on a level playing field. That's something that, you know, I take with me everywhere. So what is a level playing field? A level playing field is a situation where everyone has the same chance of succeeding. Now, if you look at this picture, it's not very level, is it? But, you know, that could actually represent a level playing field if you have a diverse range of learners. Some needs hills, some needs valleys, some needs something else. Okay. So we've talked a little bit about technology this morning. Here's a question for everyone in the room. In an educational setting, what is technology? I'm not joking. What is technology? Is it a tool or is it something else? So, for example, people say the internet is democratic, right? This is a very common phrase. The internet is democratic. Is there something within the internet that makes it democratic, or is it how people use the internet? These are all deep questions. I'm not saying that I have the answers to all of them. Personally, I see technology as a tool, but I'm open to other interpretations of technology. I said before, technology can open up new opportunities, can tear down barriers. We just need to be conscious that we don't raise barriers as well, construct new barriers. And it's part of a solution. It's not a destination in itself. Okay, so something a little personal again. My background is in mathematics. Don't hold it against me, please. It's not easy to teach maths. Why? Because when students get to university, a lot of them have to take a maths course as a core subject. They don't have any choice. So rather than choosing maths, they have maths chosen for them. Rather than doing maths, they have maths done to them. So these are incredibly big challenges when you're service teaching. It's also seen as boring, irrelevant, and esoteric. Okay, so this is, I think we're back in 2007 now. So 10 years ago, actually in 2007, I started to mess around on YouTube. I think a lot of people like Khan Academy were already in that space and starting out, but it was early days. And so I started doing budget B grade or C grade productions. Okay, you can kind of see that. Here's a snapshot. First of all, I'm a lot younger there. The camera's not straight, right? The sound's terrible. Yeah, these were really low budget productions. But I stuck with it. I didn't have a grand plan. You know, I could come and say that, I had this grand plan, you know, for X, Y, and Z. I just had to go. Okay. I stuck with it. Maybe some of you are doing YouTube as well, or you know colleagues who are doing it, or quite a lot of institutions have a YouTube presence across Australia. Okay, so I stuck with it, and of course I'm a numbers person because of maths, and you know over time nobody really cared that it was these things were low production, or that the sound quality wasn't good, or the camera wasn't straight. The people accessing these videos just grew and grew and grew. Okay, of course I was very happy with that. The subscribers are now more than my own university, and you had a real diverse set of learners, hopefully learning from your videos. Okay, and then I kind of got my big break. Google approached me and they said, look, Chris, we want to partner with you and do some things together. And you know, I couldn't believe it. It was the first time anyone had, of that magnitude, had actually paid any attention to what I was doing, right? And there was a not a resistance, but because it was the first time that this had happened to me, and Jack was mentioning this sort of this barrier from academics, it took me 3 months to make up my mind to partner with Google. Now, when I look back on that, I went on a holiday to Fiji and the US, and after 3 months, I'm like, yeah, I think I'm ready to talk now. What did you have in mind? Looking back, that was a ridiculous decision. But anyway, they were still there, right? They hadn't gone bust in 3 months. So they put me into this consortium called YouTube EDU, where they would handpick the top universities around the world and almost act like a curator of quality. Okay, now there's individuals like me, but there's plenty of well-known people. Khan Academy, you just can't stop them. So that was great. So, I got access to expertise. I learnt a lot from them. They obviously had some interest in promoting me and working with me. So that was fantastic. All right, so what have I learned? 10 years on YouTube. Well, this is similar to what I think Studiosity's kind of just coming out of now. Everybody thinks, well, not everyone thinks it. This sounds like a good idea, but what are the students learning, right? The students might feel all warm and fuzzy about it. Yeah, they like that, or I give that 5 stars or whatever, I'll share that. But do they actually learn anything? So that was the next phase. It was going from create content to measure, reflect, critically evaluate what you've done. Okay? So there's some questions that I asked myself. Okay? So what are the perceptions are like? What recommendations can be made, etc. So I started this particular study in 2008. These things were not replacing lectures. They were an add-on. A little bit like Studiosity's go. You aren't replacing the lecture or replacing any tutors. It's a huge value add. Okay. So I'm not going to tear down the lecture theatre. All right, so I looked at the analytics over 5 years. Now, 5 years in internet time is quite a long time. So we had multiple classes, hundreds of students at UNSW, and I also looked at behaviour and usage patterns across Australasia. So YouTube thinks Australasia is Australia and New Zealand. I haven't told them that that's not quite correct, but that's the way they have it in their analytics. So it's in that sense, it's kind of a national study. Okay, so at home you can see this is aggregated data over 5 years, multiple courses, and you can see that the question was, how satisfied are you with these YouTube videos as a learning tool? Okay, it's very obvious. Okay, they like the videos. They could also post some comments. So we codified the comments into 5 themes. First of all, they thought the videos were good for revision, to prepare for assessment, way of catching up on missed classes. So, for example, international, I'm not sure what it's like at your universities, but at my universities, international students very commonly arrive 2 or 3 weeks late, and they've missed all their classes. How are they going to catch up, right? Going over things that were not understood within class, raising feedback through the commenting section on YouTube directly to the lecturer. I would read all the comments, and also moving ahead if you wanted to, some sort of self-paced study option. Great. So here is a typical, this is just one video, right? So here's a typical wave of engagement, or wave of activity, I guess is perhaps better. Can you see a trend? Right? You've got these 3 spikes, sort of maybe one here, another sort of spikes. What do you think the spikes would line up with? The exams, right? The assessment. You don't need to be a genius to work that out. And it's kind of a little bit hypnotic. It's very, if you sort of compare this against most Australian universities' calendars, if they work on a semester type program, it really hits those peaks in maybe June and November. Okay. Okay, I talked a little bit about smartphones before. I looked at 3 years worth of data for the videos and had a look at the devices. So you see the smartphones have increased. The tablets, not so much, but the smartphones are definitely going there. If you go to places like Asia, South Korea, most of the internet traffic on places like YouTube is mobile. So that's a huge thing. I'm not sure, Jack, you were talking about the app before for Studiosity. Everyone wants mobile learning and mobile options. And this is a few years ago, so we weren't quite as crazy as we are now. Okay, so some results. 71% of students, at least at UNSW, chose to use the videos for their learning. They were concentrated around revision periods and tests across Australasia. Growing trend in engagement on mobile phones, great. And over 96% of students thought they were a useful learning resource. Okay, great. So a couple of things. These are things that we kind of already know, but it's good to actually have data to back that up. And if you build it, they'll come. Assessment drives activity and engagement, and get ready for the small screen. I just can't emphasize that enough. So when you're designing videos or any kind of learning resources, I think the small screen has to be a huge part of the conversation. All right, that was shameless self-plug there. Okay, so continuing with the data trends, I looked at this particular video. This is reasonably typical. Everybody knows that there's a huge disparity in STEM, and particularly in mathematics and engineering. At UNSW, we have a 4-to-1 ratio of male to female in a typical engineering class, 4-to-1. Now, as a faculty of science, we actually have 50-50 enrollments. But in these courses, women are completely outnumbered. So I thought I would look at a video, about 100,000 views, 5 years, and look at the demographics. You can kind of see that the intended audience is sort of right there with the university age. So this is 18 to 24, 25 to 34. But look down here. This is 13 to 17. 2/3 of the views in that 13 to 17 range are from women. Okay, I was a bit stunned by that. I don't know why that is. Somebody did suggest that might suggest women are better at seeking assistance than men. Perhaps men don't like to ask for help. I don't know. I would love to hear your thoughts. So this kind of opens up a bigger question here that I was pretty excited about. And this made the national papers. Using technology to level the playing field, for example, in mathematics, in terms of gender balance. Okay, it's not balanced yet, but I'm still pretty happy with 43-57. I think that is a huge win compared to 4-to-1. I don't understand why it's happening. I'm just observing. I would love to understand why it's happening. Then I can control it. All right. Now, when I started all of this, my colleagues were not very open to these sorts of things. They saw it as maybe something that they didn't condone. They weren't very comfortable with it, all this sort of stuff. So one of the biggest swipes, if you like, was, well, you know, you just watch. You don't get good by watching. It's a bit like, you know, learning's not a spectator sport. You don't get good just by watching, right? You got to do it. You got to do it, yeah? So I tried to make my videos a little bit more interactive, okay? Web 2.0, right? So what I thought was, how can you get more interactive, more activity, more active learning in a sense for someone who's watching a video? Well, the next thing was to produce some books to complement the video. So the 57,000 is the number of calculus books on Amazon at the moment. I did a search, 57,000 results, right? I know, it's a lot. So when I designed these books, they were designed to make learning more interactive and more active, and they had to do something different. So each book is linked to a playlist, a series of videos on YouTube. There are blanks, there are questions, there's assessment where you can fill in the blanks and follow along. So the idea was to stop watching passively. You know, it's like the TV. The TV doesn't care if you're watching it, right? Oh, I must be learning something, right? No. I must be learning something. I'm watching TV. I'm watching YouTube. It doesn't care if you're watching it or not. Okay, so stop watching, start doing, and start thinking. So I published these books. Great. So you can kind of see this is the first one, and then we're moving on to YouTube classes, and then live streamed YouTube classes and mobile device learning, right? Mobile learning. So there's kind of a evolution in itself there. All right, so great, 10 million readers. And these books are completely free, by the way. Again, another thing for openness. Okay, so this is kind of the next phase of my talk. This is more about digital equity. So I've sort of given you an idea of what I stand for and what I've done. This next bit's more about digital equity. So I just want everyone to just imagine a world where sound and language are no barrier to learning. Let me say that again, right? Imagine a world where sound and language do not form a barrier. So it doesn't matter if I'm talking in French and you speak Chinese. It doesn't matter if you're hard of hearing, or perhaps you have other learning difficulties. Imagine we can get rid of those barriers. Well, you might have heard of our university's 2025 strategy. We're very aggressively pursuing this strategy. This is our Vice-Chancellor, Ian Jacobs, our Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Merlin Crossley. And essentially they've come out and said, look, a just society is a very, very key part of where we want to go. Okay? It's a very, very key part. Okay? So this kind of digital equity ties in very nicely with this theme of a just society. Now, you might have heard about this a couple of years ago, the big lawsuit between the National Association for the Deaf and MIT and Harvard. Essentially, they got sued because their videos, their online learning materials didn't meet the standards for people with hearing difficulties. Okay, so this particular action was around closed captioning. So that gave me an idea. Let's look at closed captioning. Again, this is an old one. All right, great. Now, if you upload a video to YouTube, YouTube actually is pretty smart. It has an auto closed captioning function, but it's just not right. It does not understand an Australian accent. Okay? You can do it in like Scottish or Irish, you know, with different accents, but it does, as Australians, we do not register. I'm sorry, but we just don't. So, you know, so you get this crazy thing where it's supposed to be hence factorise P of Z into linear factors, and it's and heads factorise he upset. Can you see the problem? Maybe I need to talk like an American. So what we did was we got a team of students as partners type initiative here, and we got together at one summer and we did closed captioning for a whole suite of videos. Okay, so the students worked in teams. There was about 10 or 12 of them. I got them setting up sort of in a distributed leadership kind of way. All right, so that was all uploaded to YouTube. So then we tested it and we did it over a 2-month period. We surveyed the students on their experience. Here's a couple of the people who we worked with. Okay, so one of the questions was, closed captioning was useful to my learning. 6-point Likert scale. 6 is strongly agree. 1 is strongly disagree. You can see just about everybody is above that 4.5 line. So the blue ones are closed captioning and the orange ones, wait for it, are translations. All right, now Google Translate is not perfect. A lot of errors there. But the international students or ESL students, they didn't care. They still think that some of the comments were, it's not correct, it's not perfect, but I can still work out what's going on. That's a win. That's a win, okay? If I put it over here, this is percentage agree. So these are the percentages who either mildly agreed, or strongly agreed that they were useful. You can see the deaf students, 100%. The international students for the closed captioning, 100%. Everything's almost over 100%. This one's not great, but this is native speakers of English. I don't know why they're translating, but anyway. So overall, 98%. Thought it was useful. So there's a striking conclusion there. I kind of set out that I'll be helping all these people with learning difficulties, the deaf, the hearing impaired, all these sorts of things. Actually, it was good for everyone. It was good for everyone. Because people would say, I've left my headphones at home and I'm on the train, I want to watch your videos. Up comes the closed captioning. So this was a huge step forward. Closed captioning is useful for everyone. You know, some people can't understand an Australian accent. I don't know how they can't understand it. You know, they'll post a comment in YouTube saying, "You stupid Brit, I cannot understand you," right? I just can't do it. So anyway, so useful for everyone. So a couple of things. One thing I've strongly advocated for is national guidelines on closed captioning and further discussion, because what I've done is sort of students as partners. It's pretty, again, sort of budget productions. All right, shameless self-plug. Let me just check the time. What time? Okay, great. All right, I might actually just pause if anybody has any questions, because I'm going to move into the next sort of phase. And I want this to be a conversation rather than me getting up here and prancing about. So can we go to the floor for some questions? Yes. We're a little sneaky. We put them on so they come up automatically. But I think on other ones, I can actually probably go into the data and see when they've turned it on and when they've turned it off. But I'd have to dig that out. So this is a case of closed captionings were done to the students rather than the students doing closed captioning. Does that make sense? Yeah. Because I wanted them to use it and to be exposed to it. Mike.
You mentioned some of your academic colleagues were a bit sceptical about the use of online learning. Have those attitudes evolved, would you say? Yeah,
they've completely changed. So I think part of it was the sky's falling in. You know, some academics, maybe they're not ready for it, or they don't know why the change is needed. So that was a big hurdle. And you know, I when I was very inexperienced, I would probably have arguments with them. Do you know what I mean? Like I wanted this to really work and get them on board. So sometimes I would shout at them, which is just not the way to go. But now it's different, right? Now I see all of these people are on board and saying, well, you know, I don't say it now because I'm a bit older and wiser. But these people have come along now. Right. And so that's a great feeling. And also the students are the real winners here, because it's not just one person doing something. It's a whole team of people that's translated out into many, many different situations. So, and at the end of the day, it's the students that are the winners. Yeah.
And part of the reason I ask is for ourselves as Studiosity, but also our partners in dealing with what is essentially change management within institutions, bringing people along on the journey and not feeling threatened. So any tips you could give all of us would be very welcome.
Yeah, gosh, I wish I'd done a degree in change management 10 years ago. But I think, you know, in my associate dean role, that's part of it. Change management is a huge part of the portfolio. And I mean, everybody around the tables would know, especially the senior people in the room would know all about change management. And the key thing is communicating why the change is needed. You know what I mean? Right. And also looking back, the sky didn't fall in. Right. You know, Chicken Little may have gone off to speak to Henny Penny and whatever. The sky didn't fall in. So looking backward can sometimes be very, very helpful in ways that you want to move forward. Yeah.
Thank you, Chris, for that inspirational coverage of what I call universal design, which at Curtin we've just introduced as our whole disability access and inclusion plan, because universal design obviously is more than just about disability access. And your closed CC is useful for everyone, absolutely. And I have a nice example where we've done that. And in fact, we did it for the hearing impaired and also screen reading technology for the vision impaired. But the students that come from overseas And the students, for example, in health sciences are grappling with Latin-based terminologies who have no idea how to pronounce it. In fact, it's benefiting everyone.
Yeah.
So no one was excluded and everyone is rejoicing in that. And the only other thing I wanted to say was that closed captioning done professionally is very expensive.
Yeah.
So what we're about to do is experiment with crowdsourced closed captioning. So that's sort of like what you did with your students. I wondered if you thought about that as well.
Yeah, that'd be great comments. Yes, we thought about it. Time and money are an issue here. We worked it out that we measured it, to do 1 minute of video takes about 5 minutes of work. So let's say you have 40 hours, you know, that's a lot of work. And then it has to be checked and you know, edited and all that sort of stuff. YouTube and probably a lot of other places have this crowdsourcing now. Again, you have to check it. I've done it. Haven't been super happy with the results, but if you know who's doing it, for example, you had a student as partners type project, and they don't even have to download the video. They can just type it in and just forward it all through video through YouTube. So I think that's going to be a growth. It has to grow. And there's also other reasons for doing it, like search engine optimization. It's easier to find videos that are captioned. And even interactive captions where you'll see the captioning where you can search within the captions and the things scroll instead of just popping up and popping off as you go down. So it's an exciting time. Yeah. Okay, I'll keep going. Act 2. All right. Okay. Now, we were talking about this on that wonderful balcony before about openness in education. One of the core things that drives me is access to learning on a level playing field. That's really, really important to me. But I'm not sure if that's actually beyond education, if it's a sort of a social and a moral thing. I've heard at some conferences that people don't see openness as an educational virtue, right? But I'd be interested to hear your comments on that. It's something that I think might sit within education, but also it kind of transcends education. What do you think? I mean, I know UNSW is coming out, and the ARC actually is coming out with this policy that all research-funded, ARC-funded papers have to be available within 12 months to everybody and all these sorts of things. But I'd be interested to hear what you have to say. Do any of your universities have a policy on openness?
Yes, we do. And the other avenue of openness that we're really interested in exploring, and we're just experimenting now, is the use of open textbooks.
Yes.
Because the cost of textbooks, as we all know, drives the use of textbooks, and the success in the units is linked to that. The University of British Columbia has the intestinal fortitude, which I suspect my university doesn't, well, I know my university doesn't, to mandate that all textbooks used at that institution have to be openly available. Yeah. But, oh, gee, I wish we were there. But we're about to experiment with a number of first-year business units where the textbook will be deliberately chosen from a suite of open textbooks. Baby steps, but we're on the path.
Anyone else want to add? Yeah, it's a huge cost. And I think USQ is doing some stuff as well with open textbooks. And I was at a conference in Sydney a couple of weeks ago. So someone from the US was here talking about open textbooks and OER and things like that. It's been around for a while, but I think it's really important. Okay, so this kind of lines up with a lot of the sentiment today. I'm very aware that universities are perceived as hiding up in their ivory towers, right? This slide is kind of designed to capture that education is beyond universities. Higher education is a big part of what universities do, but we're all in this together. Industry, government, the wider community, students. We're all working and learning together. And this is the classic shot, you know, no, I can't be bothered to see any crazy salesman. We've got a battle to fight. The king is about to go out with a sword and slay people, whereas people have come to his door with this machine gun. Now, this is kind of, the reception that I see happening all the time. Somebody from a startup or somebody from industry comes in, we want to talk to you, and we've got these great ideas, and there are these big barriers. So like I said before, the last 10 years I've learned from these partnerships, and I'm a big advocate of universities and industry working together. So my sort of ideal university here is somewhere like Stanford. So Stanford is part university and part lots of other things. They are very well connected to Silicon Valley, and they have lots of partnerships. So like I said, I had this partnership with Google that really just was amazing. Another Japanese firm who create hardware, the document cameras that I use, we have a great relationship there. The idea is to improve the design of the document cameras, which we did together, which was fantastic. And of course, Studiosity. And again, when I was asked to sit on the academic board, I didn't say yes straight away. I thought about it. I thought, what are the consequences of this? Who are these guys? What do they do? How can I be assured of quality assurance? Okay, I think this is my last slide. It is. All right. So I've talked about a lot today. And like I said, this is more about a discussion or a conversation than me getting up here. So here's a couple of questions that we can talk about. Technology. I think the aim is to remove barriers, but we need to be conscious. Are we creating new ones in a digital equity sense? Is technology an integrated experience yet? We talk about it as it is, but is that really true? Openness, an educational virtue or beyond that? Technology is a tool or something else? And I haven't talked about these two things, but these are really interesting. We talked about AI before. One of the trends that I see emerging from all of the conferences that I've gone to in the last maybe year or so is to move away from learning from something. I learned a lot from YouTube or Studiosity, or I learned a lot from your books, to actually learning with something. So you're not learning from something, you're learning with things. You're learning with the internet. I think that's a very, very important distinction. So we're all in this together. And lastly, we've talked about AI. I won't go into this, but post-human teachers. Some of you may have known of the University of Edinburgh's experiment last year with TeacherBot. Anyone heard of it? This was a bot on Twitter that would reply to students' questions. It was great. Now, I don't know if it's going to be the Teacher of the Year or whatever, but this is kind of happening. It's not quite post-human teachers, but the students certainly didn't mind that they were learning from a bot on Twitter. They still saw value in it. Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm going to pass over to Chris now, and I look forward to chatting with you and having more of a conversation.
Thanks, Chris. Did we have any more questions for Chris while he's here? John?
Yeah, Chris, just to challenge a little bit on technology as a tool or more.
Yep.
I just think about the current generation where listening, for me, listening is something I use to make telephone calls, I read email. I might look at the odd thing on the net, etc. But if I'm doing anything serious in the way of reading, I might do it on my tablet, or I might do it on my laptop, or I might print it. One of three choices, but I've never read a book on here. But for the younger generation, this is their life. Everything is done on this. It's their world. It's how they communicate. It's how they read.